because immigration right now is proven to be the Achilles heel of any Western country. This is how people from third world countries, terrorists or terrorist sympathizers, or people who do not even know how to function or live in our society, who are frustrated, like the Afghani guy that came to the United States and just committed the terrorist attack in Washington, D.C. He was frustrated at the system because he could not understand why he couldn't beat his wife, why he had to be thrown, in jail or in court, why he's not allowed to beat his children. Well, in America, you don't beat your kids. You don't beat your wife. We respect women. We believe women and children have rights. Other people have rights. And he's so frustrated because he didn't realize this is how America is. So he feels trapped in a culture that he does not belong in.
Brigitte, probably since we talked, I didn't expect MAGA to suddenly go to war over Israel. Who likes Israel more? Who doesn't like Israel? And I thought automatically you'd have the Republican Party on the right would be pro-Israel because of the biblical history, because of where Israel sits in the Middle East in terms of as a bulwark against all the Islamic nations around it. And now you have this huge squabble. Give me your thoughts being over there as an American in the US, with your finger on the pulse at DC. What on earth is happening with this descending into chaos over Israel?
Well, there are definitely passionate opposing point of views about Israel, and all that started with the bombing of Iran. A lot of people in the United States were afraid that if we bomb Iran, we're going to go into war with Iran. Actually, Charlie Kirk and Tucker Carlson, Charlie Kirk went into the White House, flew specifically to meet with the president to stop him or urge him not to bomb Iran. Ironically, at the same time, when I was there telling him, bomb, 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 baby, bomb, bomb, bomb Iran. Thankfully, he listened to voices on our side instead of the other side. And that proved to be a very good move in basically paralyzing Iran and taking out the nuclear threat, which was not only a threat to Israel, but also a threat to the United States. So that's how the topic of Israel came about in the conservative circles, with people saying we do not want to go into another war. We do not want to send our sons and daughters to another war to die, especially after what we have seen, what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the debacle, the withdrawal out of Afghanistan under Biden. So there's a conservative camp in the United States that did not want to see that happen, and certainly not for another country. As Americans, I can understand why they are concerned, and they have a very legitimate right to be concerned about that aspect of things, sending their sons and daughters to die in another war, supposedly for another country. So there was a legitimate concern on their side, and they have a right to express that concern. The problem started with the talk then became, oh, you're anti-Semitic for standing up for America and not wanting to bomb Iran. And so that accusation really was misplaced, because I can tell you Charlie Kirk was not anti-Semitic. I can tell you that Tucker Carlson is not anti-Semitic. I can tell you that Megyn Kelly is not anti-Semitic. They are concerned about America. They love America. Unfortunately, it became such a big tug of pull on social media. And of course, social media, it's all about the buzz, the excitement, the trend, what's going on. The reality is there's a huge difference between the groups on social media and the 80 million evangelicals in the United States who will always stand with Israel, regardless of the 5 million people that listen to Candace Owens and to whatever million people that listen to Tucker Carlson, or the 2 million people that listen to, what's his name? The other guy who I've never even heard his name until this whole thing started. Nick Fuentes. So you take a block of 80 million evangelicals who will always stand with Israel and know that Israel is our ally. When push comes to shove, if America goes to war, we cannot turn our back to Kuwait. We cannot turn our back to Bahrain. We cannot turn our back to Qatar. We cannot turn our back to Saudi Arabia. We cannot turn our back to Egypt or Syria or Lebanon. And I can rattle a list of names. We can trust Israel to be our truly trusted ally that we can really depend on in the Middle East. So I guess people have blown this out of proportion. Israel doesn't have anything to worry about because at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, the 80 million evangelicals in the United States will stand with Israel basically on biblical, and for nothing because of biblical principle. Plus, right now the emotions are high because, right on the heel of a 2-year war with Gaza. Give Americans another year or 2 years, that will be distant memory. They'll forget about it, just like they forgot about 9/11, the biggest attack on American soil, and everybody will move on.
And I want to get to that big attack, which is Islam and the threat of Islam. But just one other point on that, that I've seen a lot of commentary about, why are we funding Israel? Why are we sending them so much? And then you look at the numbers and it's minuscule. It's what, a couple of billion and that is nothing for that regional stability to have an ally in the Middle East. So it's interesting that the social media try and big up this number as a phenomenal number, that America are pumping all this money. But yet, when you look at the US budget in terms of defense, this is a tiny drop in the ocean part of that, and is an important part. And I think that point is not really made enough on social media to back Israel and to back up President Trump as he continues to support Israel.
Israel is our stationary aircraft carrier in the Middle East. Whatever happens in the Middle East, we know we can count on one location where we can base our troops to defend our interests in the Middle East. We live in a global world. Now, whether you love Israel or not for Israel, whether you're evangelical or not for Jesus' sake, loving Israel, just even if you're an atheist, from a strategic, calculated point of view, for the national interest of the United States, whether you care about them or not. For the strategic interest of the United States, Israel is the only ally who shares our Judeo Christian values that we can count on, where their holy book does not tell them to kill the infidels, or that if push comes to shove and we go into war, the Islamic law tells Muslims that Prophet Muhammad divided the world into two: Dar al-Islam, the house of Islam, and Dar al-Harb, the house of war, which is any land that has not yet been conquered by Muslims and that is not controlled by Muslims. So if the Islamic world goes to war, and Islamic scholars and Islamic leaders have to make a decision between loyalty to the Islamic Ummah or the Islamic nation or the Islamic world or countries, or loyalty to the kuffar, the infidels, United States or Israel, their loyalty is going to be to the Muslim world. So really the only country we can count on to receive intelligence, major intelligence, just like we did after 9/11, was Israel, not the Arabic world. Jordan helped, Egypt helped, but the bulk of our intelligence came out of Israel. As a matter of fact, they are far better in collecting intelligence than we are here in the United States. And that's why we need to support Israel as a strategic ally in the Middle East. And here's one point, Peter, that a lot of people do not realize is that, yes, we give Israel $3 billion a year or 4 billion, whatever it is. We give Egypt the second number after that. Egypt is the second largest recipient of American dollars after Israel. I think we give Israel 3 billion, we give Egypt 2 billion. Here's the difference. The money that we give Israel, a lot of it is reinvested back in the United States in buying weapons, building things for their weapons, invested in American companies that provide support to the defense of the state of Israel. So some of that money comes back to the United States to pay the American people who are contractors, who work for defense contractors, to build and manufacture product for the state of Israel. So at least we receive something back from it, considering all the other money that we squander, millions and billions that we literally flush down the drain, you might as well, that we squander in other countries who could care less about us. As a matter of fact, we should take the money that we give the United Nations and give it to Israel instead of the United Nations. It will be much better invested money.
That's a thought. That would be a wise decision. Bridget, you've been sounding an alarm for decades on Islam and the threat that it is to the very freedoms that we all have in the West, whether it's the US, whether it's here where I am in the UK, across the Western world. I know in President Trump's first term, there was a lot of good things happening. There was a lot of pushback. But it seems as though in this second term, people have really cottoned on and there's a lot of discussion. How have you seen this? Because if you've been talking about something for decades, suddenly someone catches on. It's well done. It's taken you a while, but thank you that now you're on my side. Tell me what that is like for you in the US, having US politicians suddenly being aware of the threat of Islam and the size of Islam in the US.
Well, finally, better late than never. And I think they were forced to wake up because no one can ignore the facts on the ground in Europe. We are seeing the images before our eyes, and we are seeing the transformation of Europe to Eurabia. Now, you and I have talked about this in the past. I've been talking about this for the last 25 years. I started my organization back in 2002. I was working with Batya Orr, who wrote her book Eurabia back in 2004. We were warning and working with Geert Wilder in 2005. I remember being with him in DC. We were trying to warn our elected officials. We in the United States created, my organization is the largest national security grassroots organization in the country, with chapters nationwide. Actually, we had created chapters in 16 countries around the world trying to fight the problem. And nobody wanted to listen because they were so afraid to approach the subject of talking about religion and politics. And what are we taught in the West? You're taught two things you do not discuss at the dinner table if you want to keep the conversation civil and respectful: politics and religion. And what is Islam? It's a political movement cloaked in religion. And because Americans, because of the history of racism against the Black people, in America, nobody wants to be called a racist. Nobody wants to be called, oh, you've got a phobia of something, or you're a white supremacist, or you hate brown people, or anything like that. And the left and the Islamists work together, the leftists being used as social idiots at the hands of Islamists advancing in the United States, basically to slap labels on anybody who criticized Islam, discussed the ideology, talked about reform, talked about we need to work with the moderates and bring them on board, talking about let's discuss the ideology and the threats from suicide bombers. Nobody wanted to touch it. But now they can no longer ignore it, especially this year when you're watching Christmas markets in Europe either be canceled or be made like a fortress as if you're walking into a military base, or be it disrupted like what's happening in Brussels, what's happening in Vienna. I mean, that's unacceptable. And because we are seeing those images because of social media, because cable television in 2010, 2014 was not willing to show that. But now with the presence of TikTok, Instagram, people are no longer getting their information from television. They're getting it from social media. So people are more aware. And because people are more aware, we are now mobilizing people through Act for America to pressure our elected officials to take action. And that's how Abbott in Texas used our laws and the bills we have worked on and the research that we have provided to start going after Islamists setting up Sharia courts in the United States.
Do you think that there has maybe been a thinking sometimes in the US that this is not a US problem, this is a European problem, and surely it can't happen to America that has the First and the Second Amendments and the protection? Surely this is a far off problem. Do you think that has been part of the issue in that you don't address it if you don't think you have a problem yourself?
We knew they had a problem. That's not the issue. We knew we had a problem on 9/11. We knew we had a problem when the imam that said the prayer at the Pentagon, Imam al-Awlaki, who was invited by our leaders to say the prayer at the Pentagon memorial service for those who died, ended up being the head of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. And so we knew we had a problem. But the problem was our leaders were afraid to say anything or not be politically correct. They were afraid of the lashback. They did not want to be perceived as racist and not multicultural. And again, because of America's history, nobody wanted to talk about it. And also in America, people want to live and let live. So the reason why Islamists have such a foothold in Texas is because Texans like, oh, we mind our business, live and let live. Those Arabs, they can do whatever they want to do because America is a melting pot. People came from all over the world. You had the Irish have their little Irish area, and the Italians had their little Italian section in New York and New Jersey. And anybody that came in on the Mayflower or came into New York, all these communities, the Irish, the Italians, the whatever, the Germans that came in, they developed pockets in America as normal because people gravitate towards their own kind of people. I want to live among their own kind of people. And of course, Americans, even at that time, the Italians and the Irish, and people made fun of the Irish, and then they made fun of the Italians, etc. But the difference is the Italians and the Irish and the Germans all shared the same Western Judeo-Christian values. The Islamists who are coming in do not share our values. They believe in honor killing. They believe in subjugating women. They believe women should not inherit. They believe a woman is more stupid than a man. They believe that, or stupid, but a man is wise. They believe a woman can be divorced by saying 3 words. All these things that are so foreign to Americans. And that's why Americans did not want to pay attention to them and let them grow and have their own communities, underestimating, because we did not want to learn about the Islamist culture and world. And Americans did not want to listen to people like me who come from that world, who was warning them, and they didn't want to listen to this. And of course, the left accusing people like me of being an Islamophobe, the head of a hate group, etc. Well, now in 2025 America, we are all a hate group. We are all white supremacists, xenophobe, homophobe, Islamophobe. If you are for the police, you are anti-black people. If you want secure borders, you are anti-brown people. No matter what you stand for, they accuse you and slap a label on you. And right now, the good thing is that people have become desensitized to the label because everybody threw the words, you're a Nazi, you're a white supremacist, you're a bigot, you're a racist so much that now they have no value. So people don't mind being called whatever they want to be called because that's what the left is going to call you anyway if you believe America should be preserved as a Christian nation founded on Judeo-Christian values and freedoms. And so there's our camp and there is their camp.
Tell me, I saw one of your, I think the pin post on your X profile is the Muslim Brotherhood's plan to destroy America has been in action for over 30 years. We are now witnessing the results. And you refer to groups like CARE celebrating the wins of, I think it was like 40 plus candidates in the US elections. You kind of think that if you like the Holy Land Foundation trial, 20 plus years ago, that was a point for the US to wake up in terms of money being funneled through these organizations to Hamas and other organizations. That was a high profile trial. And yet, 20 years later, 20 plus years later, we seem to be reliving the same lessons. What has happened in the meantime, where you got a high profile case, then you've got 20 years of silence, and then suddenly you've got a realization again of these groups that have embedded themselves in the US?
The problem was one word: Obama. Yes, it was a high profile case. Yes, our government handed down 108 guilty verdicts, Peter, to American organizations and American individuals who raised $12 million to send to fund terrorism. A lot of it was raised on $150 bills, which is the price for a suicide belt to be put on a suicide bomber. So the indictment were issued. That's when Obama won the election. As soon as Obama won the election, his attorney general Holder demanded and ordered the police not to hand the indictments. And he is the one who shut down the case, and any conversation about the case, any information about the case, nobody was allowed to speak about it. I used to train the FBI. I used to train the U.S. Forces Command, the Special Forces Command, officers heading to the Middle East. By 2009, Obama stopped me and people like me from stepping a foot on any military installation. We were not allowed. Even 2008, as soon as 2008, when he won the election, I was immediately banned from any military institution. So Obama covered up the case, buried the case. His attorney general stopped the handing out of the indictment to people like CARE, because remember, they are unindicted co-conspirator at the Holy Land Foundation trial. And not only he stopped the handing out the indictment, he hired CARE as consultants to oversee and approve the counterterrorism training for our Department of Homeland Security. So he brought them in as advisors and started working with all the people that were listed on the Muslim Brotherhood Project, like, for example, ISNA, the Islamic Society of North America. They became advisors to President Obama about Middle East policy. So now we have the fox watching the hen house and speaking policy in the ear of the president. And that's the number one organization listed in the Muslim Brotherhood Project. Number two, the Muslim Student Association now has chapters on American college campuses more than the Democrats and the Republicans combined. And it goes on. NATE, the North American Islamic Trust, which owns the deed to over 90% of American mosques. Number 22 on the list is IAP, Islamic Association for Palestine, which later became CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations. And what did Obama do? Invited them to the White House. We found out White House logs where CARE had over 350 visits to the White House. So you have Obama for 8 years after the Holy Land Foundation trial doing that, uncovering up for CARE. When we had the 2016, when Trump won the election, and they have an advancement team who went into the Department of Homeland Security, and they were, transition team looking at offices, changing offices, looking as to what, or different organizations that had offices at the Department of Homeland Security. And we couldn't find CARE. The reason why we couldn't find CARE's office was inside the head of the Department of Homeland Security. So this is how embedded they were. And then, of course, Trump came to office. Trump was new. He didn't know how deep the swamp was. He had a hinge, but he didn't really know how deep they were. He is not a politician. He's a businessman. And he was green in politics. People took advantage of Trump. Trump was there only for 4 years. And then you know what happened? The Democrats stole the election. They lied. They're cheated. They propped up a senile, half-dead man as President Biden, and they continued their operation. And that's how today we are where we are today.
Is there it's interesting. Well, as we speak, I was going to bring up the Washington Times article, and I mentioned some of those organizations that run some of the mosques, including NAIR, and I think you said 90%. I've read 75% of the mosques. And interesting, my a VPN on in Europe, and I cannot access the Washington Times, that article, and it kind of shows that restriction of information. I want to look at an article discussing Islam here in Europe, and I can't even look at it. I just wanted to bring that up in terms of the war that we are up against in terms of access of information.
Exactly. And you're dealing with right now, you're experiencing now what we experienced under Obama and under Biden. And I remember when I wrote my book Rise, and the book came out in 2018. I wrote it in in the early part of 2018. And I wanted to use an article that I know was about me, an extensive article about me speaking in Idaho. And I remember Googling, looking through the internet. I know the article. I used to have the article, but my computer crashed. I lost the article that was saved. So I figured, okay, I'll go to the internet. I'll pull it up. I know exactly how the article looks like. I know exactly where it was published. I know exactly. I wanted to use it in my book. I couldn't even have access. It disappeared from the internet. That was nowhere to be found. This is how much Google and Facebook and all these people were controlling technology. Now, thankfully, things are improving a little bit right now. Facebook, Google, I think all these leaders now that are working with Trump are loosening their tight grip a little bit, at least in America. But who would have thought that in England in 2025, they will be arresting people for Facebook posts? They will be arresting. I mean, I just watched an interview, I think, with George Galloway, where they arrested him at the airport and what he's going through with his wife. And he is shocked himself that we have gotten to this point. But unfortunately, this is where we are. And that's why, Peter, we're fighting as hard as we can in the United States. And I urge people, if you are watching this interview right now in America, for those of you who are in America, go to actforamerica.org right now and join us. Click on join us. Sign up to start a chapter. Sign up to volunteer. Sign up to receive our emails and action alerts so we can reach you when there's an important bill in Congress where we want you to contact your elected officials. We monitor bills coming down for a vote at the federal level and at the state level. And we work with members of Congress on writing some of these bills. We want to be able to reach you to let you know, look, this bill is coming down for a vote. Please call your elected official. It's things like this that will help us preserve our country. And we're setting up chapters. Again, we're relaunching our chapter network nationwide. We want people to sign up. If you're watching this right now and you are in America, sign up to start a chapter in your community. We do not want to become England. We do not want to go down the same path as Europe. And now we have a chance to at least save America, so America can stand up and save Europe and the rest of the world if possible.
And I've talked to a number of people involved with different chapters, Act for America, and those involved north of your border, Act for Canada,
Yes.
and the work they do, and et cetera, et cetera. And that is a key way. I agree with you, Brigitte. The viewers and listeners can get involved, play their part, and go to the website.
And activism is so important, Peter. And this is something that citizens in all different countries in the world, especially in the Western world, must do. It's an activism. So if you are in England, if you are watching in Europe, any country in Europe, start an organization, start a group, because citizen activism is what puts pressure on elected officials to take action. If they don't hear from you, if they do not know that you are organized, they're not going to listen, they're not going to care. Elected officials care about one thing and one thing only: getting elected or reelected. And so they want your vote. Do not underestimate the power that you have with your voting power, with your voice, with your action. Can you imagine if you mobilize people in your own community, and even if you have to start secret meetings and chapters in your own community, and go out and vote and start monitoring the bills that come down? At least you can still access that. At least you can see what bills are coming down, what your parliament is voting on. This is how you're going to be able to save your country, whatever is left of it. It's never too late. You can turn around the tide, but you have got to become engaged as a citizen activist at the local level, no matter what country you live in.
Exactly. And politicians fear our votes more
That's
than
right.
anything else, or non-votes. And I think what's happening in Texas with Abbott is now an opportunity for the upcoming midterms to say, well, unless you take a position on Islam that's not compatible with our freedoms in the West, then you don't get our vote. But part of that on the courts, you mentioned North America, Islamic Trust, NIT, and the huge number of mosques it controls, and in that Sharia courts that it controls, and then the Islamic Tribunal of Texas, which is one of the largest Sharia courts. I think it ruled on 200 cases last year. I don't think politicians, I don't think the public by and large, Brigitte, realize that how Sharia courts treat those who are not Muslim men. Anyone else is cast aside. And here in the UK, they talk about that, we don't have 85 Sharia courts. They're Muslim arbitration tribunals. They're resolution dispute places. It doesn't trump the national law. Tell that to some of those women that it doesn't trump national law. And I know that's this conversation being had, but I mean, tell us a little bit more about how these courts, even if we're told they are actually not superseding national law, that does not mean anything for often the women in those communities.
Exactly. You are correct. Sharia courts or Sharia law is where a man and a wife, they call them, Sharia tribunal. And here's how they're doing it in the West. Here's how they're doing it in the United States. So an Afghani man or an Egyptian man or an Indonesian man, or choose your Muslim country, gets into a fight with his wife. Let's say he's beating her, he's abusing her. She goes to the courts and says, to the American court, I want a protection order from my husband. They have to show up in front of the civil court in America. The husband tells the judge, I am an Egyptian or I am a Pakistani. And in my religion, I have to be judged under Pakistani law because of my religion. And this is how they are being transferred to Sharia law, because he said, I want to be charged according to my religion. I'm a Muslim, I'm Pakistani. I want to be charged. I want to go to court where I can do it under Pakistani law because of my faith. They are using the religious law, and I'm sure they're doing the same thing in nation in the West, Europe or the United States or North America, anywhere. So when they go to the Sharia courts, the imam then tells the husband, of course, a woman is his property. Because when you look at what the Quran says about women, because remember, this is judged under Quranic law. Sharia law is Quranic law, is Islamic law. It's not a law like we think of law, like a legal section 1, 2, 3, whatever. They basically open up the Quran and they say, okay, let's see what the Prophet or what the Quran or what the Hadith said about what the Prophet would do in this case. And so they would open up the Quran and they would say, well, Prophet Muhammad said, you can beat your wife if she disobeys you. If your wife is arrogant, you can beat her. You can put her in another room to sleep in another bed. You can cast her away. You can whatever you want to do to her. Now, the Quran does not specify what beating or how do you beat her. You can beat her however you want to beat her. And so this is how these women are feeling helpless. They cannot go to the police. The police does not protect them. And I remember a case in the United States in 2010 in New Jersey where a woman was being abused by her husband, tortured, physical torture, actual physical torture, goes to the court and asks for a protection order from her husband. The court denies her protection 3 different times. Finally, she appeals it. In the appeal, the court orders her to live under her husband, who's continuing to abuse her, because the husband says, as whatever, I think he was Pakistani or Egyptian, under my law, I need to be judged under whatever Pakistani law. It took an appellate court to overturn the decision. By that time, he could have killed her, but that's how they were doing it. People in New Jersey, when I went on the air talking about this, they could not believe it. They did not want to believe it. They could not believe this is happening in America. But the problem is that most people do not understand how these courts operate. They do not understand the rights of women and what's happening to these women. And that's how they are the Western people ignore it completely. It doesn't affect me. I don't have to be judged by that. I don't give a care how they judge each other or what they do. But this is becoming a major problem.
In terms of immigration, let me touch on that, and then let me finish off on the number of mosques. I think you had talked about possible 200,000 Afghan nationals that came to the US under Biden's embarrassing, horrendous withdrawal from Afghanistan. And we heard the story. There was a story a couple of months ago that we took one Afghani and he was allowed 19 members of his family who had not been vetted, but they were allowed to come over. And I think you were on Stinchfield Tonight a few days ago, and you made the point that it's time for Congress to wake up and ban all immigration from countries who hate us. And it seems that Trump is getting that. And I guess it's shocking to think that up until President Trump, the US has allowed people to come in who hate Americans, seek America's destruction. And Trump now is saying, this is crazy. Enough is enough. And is starting to put the stop on that. How is that happening? And does that get through Congress, or is that President Trump just pushing that through?
It has to go through Congress. And he wants to put a permanent pause on importing people like this to our country, as they should. This is why we at Act for America issued an Act Now campaign directed at all members of Congress. So if people go right now to actforamerica.org, click on Act Now, you'll see the Act Now campaign. You can take action on it, especially if you live in the United States, or if you are an American living overseas. You can take action on that campaign by putting pressure on your member of Congress, because Congress has to vote on it. So we are targeting the House as well as the Senate in order to support the president to pass this bill. And we want to do it as fast as possible. And here's why, Peter. We're trying to pass as many bills as we can, executive orders that the president signed, because if they are not passed as bills in Congress, an executive order means nothing. It could be changed as soon as somebody else comes into power, if the Democrats win the election. And that's why we are in a race against time to codify into law as many executive orders as we can that President Trump passed, and especially the laws relating to immigration. In the big, beautiful bill, we were able to integrate 18 executive orders that we were able to bundle regarding immigration into that bill and pass them as a bill. That cannot be reversed, because immigration right now is proven to be the Achilles heel of any Western country. This is how people from third world countries, terrorists or terrorist sympathizers, or people who do not even know how to function or live in our society, who are frustrated, like the Afghani guy that came to the United States and just committed the terrorist attack in Washington, D.C. He was frustrated at the system because he could not understand why he couldn't beat his wife, why he had to be thrown, in jail or in court, why he's not allowed to beat his children. Well, in America, you don't beat your kids. You don't beat your wife. We respect women. We believe women and children have rights. Other people have rights. And he's so frustrated because he didn't realize this is how America is. So he feels trapped in a culture that he does not belong in. And so we have imported these people. And I think right now the West needs to come to a Jesus moment, to say, what are we going to do? Are we going to allow our society to be destroyed? Because this is a matter of death or this is a matter of survival right now. We either live or we die. And we have imported the cancer that's killing us. We have to make a decision. We either operate and get the cancer out of our body so we can have a chance to survive. It's going to be painful. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be a recovery period. Nobody ever walked into a hospital and told the doctor, yippee, go ahead and cut me open and take the cancer out because I am so excited I'm going to go into surgery. Nobody does that. But any patient that goes into surgery to get the cancer out understands that that's his only chance of survival. Because if you keep the cancer in your body, you will die. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And we are watching Europe right now at stage 4 cancer. We in the United States and in Western nations need to pass bills immediately that will halt immigration immediately so we can assimilate whoever we have and we can export back to their countries like Afghanistan or Syria. Syria is stable right now. Why should there be any Syrian immigrant left in Germany, for example? There's peace in Syria right now. The Syrian president is coming, welcomed at the White House, welcomed in Saudi Arabia. There's no more war. Time for them to go back home. The Afghanis in the United States, a lot of them are welcome back in Afghanistan. They can go back home. And so this is why we are pushing for these bills right now in America.
Well, actforamerica.org encourage everyone to go and make use of that actforamerica.org and play your part. Brigitte, let me just finish on the issue of mosques and what that brings in an area. And I live in Londonistan, but when I looked at the figures over in Texas last month, and I thought I would check into the US figures, and I was shocked to realize that in 2000, there were maybe just under 1,300 mosques. In 2020, there were 2,700, officially at least. And in only the last I think it was in 2 years, 48 new mosques had gone up in Texas. And it was that phrase that I'd used in that panel interview, 48 mosques in 24 months. That's not just, we sometimes think if a church goes up, that's a church. But if a mosque goes up, then there's a demand for a whole load of other issues to support that, including you'll see the food shops change. You'll see the halal symbol on a lot of the shops. You'll see shops selling Islamic clothing. You'll see a call for Sharia finance. I think it's important for the viewers and listeners to realize, certainly the Americans, in Europe, we've seen the huge industry, I think, that goes around Islamic immigration. The US haven't seen that to the same extent, but really the growth on halal food is huge and it fits into the massive growth in mosques. So may just finish on that for you to really help the viewers understand that this is all a package. You don't just get a mosque Friday prayers for an hour and a week. This is so much more that comes with these changes in our societies.
It is a lot of very different changes into our societies. And again, the different in America, I do not know about England, I'm sure, in any Western nations, but specifically in the United States, we have freedom of religion. You are welcome to come to our country and build whatever house of worship you want. You can build a church. You can build a synagogue. You can build a Buddhist temple. You can build a mosque. We're not arguing against building a house of worship. The threat becomes when that mosque becomes a network center for terrorist operation, exporting terrorism out of a community. Because a Buddhist temple is not instructed or used as a base of operation for terrorist activity. A church is not used as a base of operation for terrorist activity. A synagogue is not used as a base of operation for terrorist activity. But a mosque, you can plot the destruction of your enemy in a mosque. It becomes a command center. You can harbor and shelter terrorists in the mosque because you're protecting Muslims against the house of war, the Dar al-Harb that the Quran talks about and the Prophet. You can store ammunition in a mosque and it's permissible because a mosque is a house to protect the Islamic Ummah, the Islamic nation. And it's a very different group of people who do not share our values. So in the Judeo-Christian world, even the Buddhists, they respect their women, they respect their children, they do not want to kill any, they do not call for the killing of people simply for killing people because we don't like their religion or their faith and we don't agree with them. Even if Christians want to convert you, they want to shower you with love. They want to convert you with love. They're not going out there, you either convert or we kill you. We don't operate that way. So there's no threat from all the previous religions that we have imported. But there is a threat from the Islamic religion. And that's what the West is grappling with right now. And the same thing in the United States. And that's the threat. Once a mosque opens up, then you start seeing more women dressed in the black and the hijab. You see the transformation of your country and your culture. It's no longer your country and your culture. It's as if you are walking in Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia, except these people move geographically. They establish like a Saudi Arabia geographic in your country where they are operating with halal meat, where women are allowed to be beaten, where the worth of a woman is half of that of a man, where a woman is considered stupid because she's not believable. Her testimony in Sharia court is equal to half of that of a man. That's why you need two women as witnesses to testify against a man. All that's the degradation of a society, the cheapening of our values, the cheapening of the belittling of the value of 50% of our society, the women and children. This is the impact that it has on our culture. Not to mention, Peter, the dumbing down of our societies by cousin marriages. Because when you have cousin marriages, you dilute the pool of good genes. And this is how you end up with retarded people. We call them mentally challenged in the West, because we don't want to offend anybody. Medical problems. I mean, look what Europe is witnessing right now because of cousin marriages and the burden on the healthcare system, on the natural resources of a society. Our brain as men and women, contributing members of a society who create, who build, who start businesses, who create the art, who become creative, create businesses, the doctors, the lawyers, the engineers. You don't have that in a society where the gene pool is becoming weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. And that's a problem that the West doesn't even want to talk about. It's uncomfortable to talk about these issues.
Islamic inbreeding is certainly not a topic you'll see on the BBC or PBS or anywhere like that. Brigitte Gabriel, I really appreciate you giving us your time today. I encourage the viewers not only to pray for what you do, but to act by going on to actforamerica.org, play your part and make sure you amplify what Brigitte is doing. But thank you for giving us your input and insights today, Brigitte. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter. Glad to be with you. Have a great day.